my project is a whitewater park, which has really nothing to do with saunas. We live on the Rogue River, and we're at a class 4 rapid where basically have 2,000 CFS, cubic feet per second of water flow, dropping 20 feet over the length of an Olympic slalom course. So we're building an Olympic slalom training center and basically a play park on the Rogue River. And the project, it basically was impossible a few years ago, and now it's reached the stage where it's become inevitable. It's one of the most heavily regulated rivers in the country. There's endangered salmon. It's a Native American sacred site. In fact, we found the artifacts that brought back the salmon ceremony that was there for thousands of years. So we brought that on ourselves. But anyway, it's getting this project together involves, we had a meeting of 20 different agencies and 4 tribes, and just on and on. I say that because, impossible projects are really fun, and that's why to do them. And so, why am I here? And the reason, you should know why you're here, and the reason I'm here is because I'm married to Mary, and Mary knows about spas and I don't. But I do know about telling stories. And the reason to prove to you that I know a little bit about telling stories is that I managed to convince Mary to move from Manhattan to a little town of 1,000 in the middle of nowhere on the Rogue River in Southern Oregon. So that's a good story. And so what I want to tell you, so I have a couple of stories to tell you that I hope will be interesting. And the first one is the story of the three sweat lodges. And the first one, as you all know, was too hot. And this was my first sweat lodge experience. I was the editor of Spirituality and Health magazine, and I was going to my first sweat lodge on a mountaintop in Southern Oregon. It was late August. The fire danger was labeled as extreme. There were air tankers flying overhead to one of the largest fires in the history of Southern Oregon happening at that time. I had no idea what was going on, except that I was driving up a hill to help create a very large bonfire. And anyway, there I was with these serious Native Americans that I didn't really know, and they were showing off because I was the editor of this magazine, so they were building a really big hot fire on the top of this hilltop with the air tankers, and it was frankly really terrifying. There was one little hose, and I was running around with the hose, sprinkling everything I could, trying to keep the fire down, and they were laughing at me. But then I went into the sweat lodge, and they really, I think they wanted to cook me because, to prove that they were tough. And so I was groveling, in the dirt, just hanging on. It was exceedingly painful. So that was my first experience. And my next one was with a New Age community, the New Warriors. There's an initiation that goes on for a weekend. If I told you the whole thing, I'd have to kill you. But part of it involved a sweat lodge. Well, New Warriors are not Native Americans. Not necessarily. And so when you go to the place to make the sweat lodge, it's not necessarily true that you can create a fire if there's a fire danger. So we had the first sweat lodge with no fire. And it was very cold. And I was sitting around in the sweat lodge with 12 naked men shivering. And, anyway, but the thing is, it was actually a very powerful experience without the fire, shivering with these guys. That was, and part of the reason they stayed with the whole program was that it really was powerful, fire or not. But, so then the third sweat lodge was actually just right. And it was my 50th birthday. And this was on the land where we live, on the river. And I really didn't know what I was going to do to turn 50, but some of the people I'd gotten to know in the Native American community who were involved in the salmon ceremony and those kind of things said, well, let's build a lodge. And so we actually spent a day cutting the willows, and we built this lodge, and there 4 of us went in and did the whole ceremony. And it was, that was the moment I really got it as a, this is really important. And in jumping in the river and just connecting to my place, to myself, to these people, to their tradition in a way that I really felt like I was a part of. Well, I felt like it was my tradition now. And that was a really wonderful thing. But I also became really curious about the tradition, and of course, that was, the sweat lodge we built was actually a Lakota sweat lodge from somewhere else, because the people, the natives of the Takelma, were marched out in 1850. And what they had was very different. They had pit houses, and the pit houses were essentially, it was a smoke sauna where the men lived. And the question is, well, why did they do this? I mean, there are all the ritual reasons or religious reasons for doing this, but why in particular did these people do this? And the answer came to me kind of unexpectedly when I found a tick on next to my belly button. And it was a tick that I had never seen before, so I took it to Vector Control and I spent $60 to get the tick tested. And 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from Vector Control saying, yeah, actually, that tick you brought in has Lyme disease, and you should go see your doctor. And I said, well, actually, I knew that. I have a temperature of 103 degrees right now. So I'm flat on my back with Lyme disease, and I know enough people who've been really debilitated by this thing that I was really, really concerned. But I was also thinking about it, and some of it was after the fact, but what my body was doing was bringing my my temperature up to 103 degrees to kill this Lyme disease. And here I am living in a place with Lyme ticks, where the culture has been there for thousands of years, and what do? They live in sweat lodges. I'm thinking, man, this may be religious, but this is just basic survival. And I think, that's really, really important. And sort of same thing with going back to being barefoot, is realizing that this is old wisdom. And my last story, I've spent a lot of time studying the mind-body connection. I'm pretty unstoppable. When I was a senior, I started rowing at Yale and graduated. I was a philosophy student, but I graduated on the Olympic team and wrote a book, my senior thesis, on the philosophy of sports. It was called The Shell Game. Got a B on it, but it was published and it was a bestseller back in '82. But it was about the mind-body connection and about the extremes of living. I mean, how do you make the Olympic team? And it was all about using my mind to drive my body. And literally, I did the thing where you hold your finger in a candle flame to see how hard, long, how much damage can I do? You can do a lot.
Yeah.
And then, but what is that about? And in all, in being in this world for a very long time now, and having done a couple of magazines, American Health and Spirituality and Health, and talked to some really interesting people, it comes down to, there are 4 words that life is constantly asking us. And anybody want to guess what those 4 words might be?
Why are we here?
No, but that's a good one.
Why me?
No.
Why you? No.
No.
Who am I?
No, it's for life itself.
Yeah.
You see, life is expensive. We're always fighting entropy. And the question is always, where is the energy? And if you look at a single-celled creature, it has a sort of on-off switch in its intelligence system. It's either in food, so it's going forward, or it's not in food, so it's tumbling. Where is the energy? And so that operational system, that intelligence system evolves into the point where, we have this incredible monkey mind of all these different kinds of questions, social energy, our bank accounts, or, friendships, all these things. But it's basically what's always being asked of us is where is the energy, and learning to control that. People do all kinds of things, but the illusion that comes out of that, the illusion that we deal with is that somehow our mind is separate from the body. That we're somehow different from this single-celled organism. And fundamentally, at some level, we're not. But the reason this matters in this context is you go back 3 years ago when that guy Ray had this sweat lodge with 60 people in Sedona, and he cooked 3 people. And anyway, 3 people died in this thing, and he came. Afterward, he came out on television. He'd been to prison for a couple of years. He was obviously shaken, sorrowful, all these things. But at the end of the day, he fundamentally didn't understand what he had done wrong. And the reason I say that is that he said that, I just chose the sweat lodge because it was a physical metaphor. Something, like, jumping out of an airplane, or bungee jumping. It's a way of sort of proving yourself. Well, that's only true if you believe that mind and body are separate. And he was a proponent of a book called The Secrets, which some of you may have heard about or read, which is sort of the idea that you could just dream. By the law of attraction, you can think something and the universe will bring it to you. And this total separation of mind and body that he was preaching, and it really it doesn't work, because when you are in a sweat lodge and you're teaching about separating mind and body, or using it as using your mind as a tool to control your body in the sweat lodge, you're just asking to hurt yourself. It's really simple, because as you heat up, that's when you get the fevers, that's when you get the hallucinations. And so, the fundamental practice, that's, I hear about, competitions to see how much heat people can take. And as a 22-year-old, I'd say, wow, isn't that cool? As a 56-year-old, I'm going, oh my God, this is just a sign that you just don't get it. It's something that the sweat lodge is where we need to teach people to not dissociate, as some athletes do, but completely associate, to really, feel that connection, open the mind, open the body. It's all the same thing. And not to cook ourselves. And anyway, that's my story. I'm sick of it.
Thank you very much. You are a good story.